You are listening to the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast, where each Monday musing plus one in depth interview per moon takes you through the portal to the patterns of nature, the architecture of the cosmos, and to the divine language of our minds. Your host, Elizabeth Diane, expands your perception of the world and the awe of creation. With a light heart, she encourages an exploration to find the truth as it is evident to you. Every episode opens the doors to self empowerment, demystifies the power of symbology and archetype, intersects relationships with matter and spirit, then circles back to ground in these seeds of life into the kind of wisdom you can apply to your being, soul, and purpose. Welcome to the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast.
Welcome, Sacred Spheres, to this episode of the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast, where today I have a guest that I'm excited to talk to, Brian Berneman, who has founded the Conscious Action. It's like a collective of people, a movement. It might even be a lifestyle. And I'm excited to hear more about it from you, Brian. So welcome to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here and for welcoming me into the space. And from what I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful conversation.
I agree. And when I read about you and saw that the work that you're doing and that you've been immersed in neuroscience and that you have a deep long time practice, at least 15 years or so, of yoga, meditation, mindfulness, different healing modalities, I was very intrigued. And so I'd love to hear more about the work you do.
Thank you for that. I think that it's always so interesting sharing about what I do. I was actually yesterday at an event and someone asked me and I was like, okay, what do I say of all of the things that I bring into this world? And ultimately, I think that why I do the things that I do is to support people with their well-being, just with the understanding of how different ways of thinking, different traditions, and different techniques have helped me to reconnect with myself and to reconnect with what's outside of me. So I do that in a lot of different ways. I teach at university here in Auckland, New Zealand. I teach meditation classes, movement classes, embodiment classes. I work one-on-one with individuals on mentoring, guiding, coaching type of space. I do a lot of healing work, so different holistic therapies. I work a lot with sound, crystals, and then I run a lot of events, workshops, and retreats, and run a podcast as well. So a lot of different moving parts. Underlying all of that is the understanding of how to bring more awareness into our lives and how can we create the changes so we can have an impact in the world. And that is the underlying reason why I'm showing up in this world in this way.
Beautiful. And the gifts that you're giving humanity by sharing this can really help. Like I know that so many people are just ready for their suffering to end, or that just the struggles. And it sounds like what you're bringing to people is something that helps give them a framework for understanding and maybe moving forward in a way that might bring them maybe a bit more inner peace. I've experienced, a lot from my meditations and mindfulness practice, bringing that mindfulness as much as I can from moment to moment and continuing to refine that and find a lot of inner peace, a lot of flow, like things just working out better. less resistance to struggles, although they still come up, which is my growth. Then I see it as a gift because I feel a little better equipped to deal with things. Do you have any other things that you want to add, benefits?
I mean, so many different things. And this, I feel like it's one of the reasons why through the years, for myself, but as well for the work that I do, that I wanted to immerse myself in a lot of different ways of thinking and traditions and techniques, because we all operate differently and we're all in a path and a journey towards a slightly different direction, and we all resonate with something slightly different. And I've had a lot of people or even businesses that I work with that their issues are more like they just want to find balance between work and life, whatever that separation has been created. It's like they want a little bit more balance in there, or they want to, as you were saying, having that shift in their understanding of their circumstances, even though they might seem challenging circumstances. How are they experiencing them is the key aspect of that. Or, like how to be in relationships, or how to understand their own practice and their own growth as they start to peel the layers of themselves. So there are so many different things in there. And ultimately for me, and this was my path, I, as a teenager, when I started to get introduced by my parents to a lot of these different wisdom teachings, I was super stressed out. I was completely, even though at that moment I didn't know this, I was completely out of touch with my body and with my feelings. And I was just only in my head. And I was always, like ruminating on everything. And I started to get into the movement practices, the embodiment practices, reconnecting with this vehicle that I have, which is amazing, and the feelings associated with connecting with the energy in this world. And that shifted as well, that I started to open myself to working with energy, and then energy healing, and then sound and vibration. And then all of that together with my meditation practice, that started to shift the way that I was experiencing life. So I went from being super stressed out, even when I was driving as a 16, 17-year-old, like I used to get road rage. Yeah. And then suddenly, like, all of that just stopped. And I'm like, now, like, for the more than 15 years, I haven't experienced stress. Like, yes, there's tension. Yes, there's challenges. I haven't experienced stress in the way that stress is something that we create.
Yes.
Whatever is happening is not stressful. It's just what it is. And one of the things that I remember, one of my teachers in one of the main practices that I have done for half of my life now has been what it's called Kumye Tibetan yoga. And in that practice, one of the things is understanding your energy body. And if your energy body is big, then whatever is happening outside is just a situation. Yet the same situation, but me on a small, emotional, stressed out body, then that becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. So it's the same situation, yes, yet my experience of it is what changes. And through the years of doing that exploration on myself, then that turned into me starting to share. So I didn't plan on being a healer or being, like someone sharing all of this. That was just my path to understand myself. And little by little, I started to get either asked to share something or to teach a class or different aspects of it. And I love it because I find that it's such a pleasure to be able to live my life and make a living in this, like world that I still need to make some money to be able to live in a place and pay rent, that I'm able to actually do this for my life, that I'm able to do this for myself and also for other people, to support them and to see their changes and to see everything that is going on in their lives and the shifts and the transformations. And that's, for me, it's beautiful, and it's the way that I am showing up in this world, and I love it, because as as more people do their own work with
Yes.
themselves,
Mhm.
that has such a ripple effect, because they touch everyone that is around them, and then that just expands and expands and expands.
It does. It does. And as you were talking, actually, I had this vision when you addressed how unique we are, how individual we are, and you're so honoring that we have our own unique paths. And I just had this image of fractals, either, like tree branches or mycelium or whatever it is, that we're all this branching of the whole, and how we each have our path in that. And yeah, and I could totally see the ripple effect and how that just gains momentum.
Mm.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm here in Mount Shasta, and there were Tibetan monks here just this last weekend. And so when you mentioned some of your practice with their methods, and I listened to them and some of their talks and their presentation, and they were also doing the sand mandala, which it just is amazing to me how intricate it is. And so reflecting on that, they were talking about how much they were having us visualize things as we were doing different processes. And yeah, and I see you nodding, and so while this may end up on YouTube, it's also a podcast, and I just love to see your enthusiasm as I'm speaking to this.
Lisa, one of the things that I find so fascinating with mandalas, especially those that are from Tibetan Buddhism, is all of the different layers that they are there. Like, I feel like a lot of times, and this just is my experience with a lot of people nowadays, a lot of people see mandalas as this beautiful geometry, or these beautiful like drawings. Yet on the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, there's teachings embedded in those mandalas. Those mandalas are like a palace, and those palaces are the different levels of consciousness. And then you have the outer ring, and in a sense, one of the things that one tries to do or aims to do is to actually be able to break those outer edges, to understand the palace is not reality, that's just my reality, and there's much more, which is instead of the relative reality, is that ultimate reality. And once we're able to break free from that, then we're able to see all of that. And within, there are so many other teachings. And also the fascinating thing, and I don't know if you were there to see it the other day, is once all of that work of focus and concentration and intention is done, then you just wipe it. And it's like impermanence, and the teaching of impermanence, and the teaching of understanding what is impermanence pointing towards, which is for me one of the biggest things with the Buddhist teachings. I've always been fortunate of how I was taught about a lot of these things, even with understanding death and impermanence or suffering. It's not about that negative thing.
Right.
It's about what is that pointing, where that impermanence and that death is pointing to actually the beauty of this present moment. And how can I see the beauty? How can I understand and be grateful for each moment? How can I understand the preciousness of this human life that I don't know when it's going to end? Like, it might end whilst we're having this conversation. For me, I don't know. I might live for another 100 years. I don't know. And the beauty is not it's not about getting caught up in when is this going to end. It's about how can I enjoy it now whilst I'm here, whilst I'm doing this. And then the moments that, with the mandala, it's beautiful, it's done. And then it's like, okay, gone, moving on to what's next.
Yes. I totally embraced that part of the teaching of it as well when they did. And it was cool for me, I didn't want to be too analytical as I watched them get ready to sweep away the sand in that intricate, beautiful pattern, but they took the end of a dorje, which is like for power, to receive power, the point of it, and just went through the 4 gates. So like they were following the 4 directions, and to me, I always figured out those gates are like that container of the reality, like the inner palace, and you're just bringing something outside in, which I thought was fascinating. And to hear you say that the idea is to burst through the edges of it. And I love, like you heard me in the introduction, addressing people as sacred spheres, because I feel like we're just this radiance of, infinite directions and infinite expansion. So the idea of busting out of that is really cool. And then they took the brushes and they went around and in 8 different places, first from the 4 directions and then 4 more, sweeping in a spiral pattern in towards the center. And of course, the center is always symbolic to me of, like reflecting our connection to source of all that is, and when we find our center, it's no longer is there really this separation of inside and outside, there's that wholeness.
And I think that is one of the things a lot of times, especially as not only from a Buddhist perspective, but as well a lot of the work that I do with energy and healing. I always say to everyone that I work with, healing is not something that one does. Healing is just a recognition of your wholeness. Healing is your path towards wholeness. That is what, I use Reiki, I use different energy methodologies, I use family constellations, I use sound, vibration, crystals. All of that is just a key to open the door to reconnect with that wholeness. And that a lot of times for me is so important, because I recognize that we are one. And also we are experiencing it as a unique, dynamic energy. We are experiencing all of that, yet there is a oneness, there is that wholeness. And at the same time, on a way that we have been living for a long time, when someone comes to see me, I always try to get them to understand I'm not healing them. I'm just enabling the space for them to go back to their own wholeness. And that is, I think, that's so important when a lot of times people have given their power away, because that's what we've been trying to do to either governments or religions or to a doctor or to whoever it is that is, in a sense, in a power dynamic there. And that, I think that it's so important to recognize that we have our own agency. We all are powerful. We all are creators. We all have these chances and these opportunities. It's just, how do we bring back alignment to that to be able to see that?
Right. Beautiful. Wow. And with so many modalities that you mentioned, because we're all so unique, right?
And that's, for me, is the fascinating thing about being able to have done all of these different things, because I can meet a lot of people where they are. And that for me is key, because as we've been talking, like we are all different. We all have had a different life up until this moment. So what works for one person doesn't work for the other. So it's about understanding our uniqueness, and and this is why every time that I work with people, everything that I do is completely personalized. There's nothing that is like cookie cut. Everything is like, okay, it's this person, okay, what's their energy, what's their understandings, what are they in their life, what's going on. Okay, now I can meet them where they are. And sometimes it's, like working and being like, okay, like let's try this. And it's like, well, no, that didn't actually work. Okay, let's try this other thing until we find what's the right key to unlock that door. But it's so important for me to be able to see things also holistically and not just from one point of view.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah, getting out of. In fact, I listened to your most recent podcast on that topic, that importance of being able to get out of one point of view and understand multiple points of view, at least challenging yourself to see a few, and then realizing, and then come back to maybe what your original assumption might have been. And that was perfect timing for me to hear it too, because I'm listening to other people around me today have viewpoints that I'm like questioning. Did you look at it from another way? And it's a good reminder to me too, how much do I move forward thinking this is the one way, this is the one thing, or this is what worked before, it's the only thing I know, and then staying confined from growing by not saying, okay, maybe somebody else is doing something different or presenting me with a different new idea, but I'm really comfortable right here. This is the familiar, the known, and I'm really comfortable right here. They seem to be having success with that, but if I don't realize that thinking about it makes me uncomfortable because I'm just ready for growth, or that's where I will be growing, and growth can be uncomfortable, then I might be like, nope, I'm just sticking with what I know.
and with that, I think that it's so important to go with what we resonate with.
Yes.
And like going some steps back, we need to actually learn how do we resonate with something. So if I'm not in touch with my feelings, there's no way that I can resonate with something.
Right.
And this, a lot of times, this is where I think that a lot of times it's very interesting in the, let's call it more conscious or spiritual spaces. There's a lot of ideas that are presented, and it's like, well, like some people are 10 steps before that. So how can we meet everybody where they are as well? And this is one of the things that I love about not being close-minded, and in my own experience, and being able to be presented with different things that at one point in my life that was true. Yeah. And then later on that stopped being true because I went beyond that. And it's not that now that is actually untrue. No, that was true at that moment. And for someone else, where they are, that might be true. This is the interesting thing about being able to hold those different perspectives, and about being able to have that balance as well, and to be able to understand, where am I? It's not where I was, and it's not where others are. I'm in my own unique path here. So where are those other people? And it's not about comparing. It's about just understanding that we are living in this multi-dimensional, multi-layered, like as you mentioned with the fractals, like there's all of these different ways of seeing things and perceiving things. So how can I allow that when I'm in relationship to others as well?
Right. It sounds complex, but yet it leads to more truth and more richness in life. And as you were saying that, actually, personally, I realized, that's one of those things that I love drawing sacred geometry. And it's because it brings me back to something so simple, but yet profound in so many ways. I just get insights or whatever. There's as I'm growing on my spiritual path, I also get reminded of, just where everything starts, the core of everything, and something that is easy for me to see as truth in this reality, and then my mind, if it expands, well, what about a different universe? Maybe do the rules of math and sacred geometry apply there? And it'd be fun to explore, but I can open to that and just say, there's something that I can count on here, and be creative with it, and then feel like, okay, I can keep expanding, and then I can come back to this simplicity, the simple truths, and then expand in the designs and the awe of life with how everything is created from some things that are so simple. But yeah, I've embraced it as part of my spiritual practice because that I've noticed that effect for me. You know, as I was awakening and just suddenly just felt like all the things that I thought were true were just crumbling around me. And thought I'd be married forever, and you know, that I wanted things a certain way, and then I suddenly was realizing there's so much more than what our physical eyes and ears, you know, that our five senses see and hear. And it was just blowing me away. But then I could come back then to something that felt like, okay, here's some grounding, here's some solidity for me to navigate this new world. And then realize after a while, like I gained even more by being able to let go. When I thought I was losing, oh, I have to let go of my grip of something. And then realize, wow, I've gained everything. I've gained so much more.
And you know, what you're saying as well is that recognition. I think that this is one of the things for me as well with sacred geometry, that there's a recognition of something that is true there. There's a recognition of something that is simple yet super complex at the same time.
Yeah.
And one of I was introduced, not this must have been like, I can't remember, but perhaps like 14, 15 years ago, back in Argentina, by this other Argentinian person that is called Matías deStefano, that now is
Big
a little
fan.
bit, now it's getting to be a little bit more well known. Back then, like, it was like, you know, this kid from Argentina. He's my same age, so
Awesome.
like, so I found a lot of resonance with him, and he was one of the first ones that introduced me to the idea of sacred geometry.
Wow.
And he was talking about it as well from a really interesting perspective, which later on through the teachings of Drunvalo Melchizedek, I also learned is, am I looking at this from the feminine perspective or from the masculine perspective? Am I looking at the lines or am I looking at the circles? And, you know, and being able to hold all of that at the same time, again, it's like, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's that, for me, it's that, you know, again, perspective, simplicity and complexity, they also meet each other.
Yes.
So there's, you know, like what's simple also is complex, and what's complex is also simple. And to be able to use all of that as we navigate through life, I think that that's one of the most important things, because at the end of the day, is, you know, like, why are we here? What are we doing? Like, am I here to do what? And I believe that we are here to experience life, to experience actually, or like the range of experiences that are there for us. And yes, as I've been living so many lifetimes, I don't need to relive everything.
Right.
I just need to focus on, okay, this is the direction, this is what resonates, this is what is true at this time. And to be able to hold all of that, and to be able to bring all of the other lifetimes, to be able to bring my ancestors here, to be able to bring all of the other energy beings that are available, and to basically create this amazing soup with all of these amazing ingredients. And it's like, it's not just this Brian here in this life that, you know, I'm living here. It's like all of that together. That, in a sense, you know, like from a sacred geometry perspective, it's like making sure that all of this fits. And it's so fascinating to be able to just open my experience to allowing all of that, when all of that is mysterious, is invisible, it's not something that I can touch, yet it's something that I can feel and something that I can experience. And this is one of the most fascinating aspects of life for me, which is, what can I experience that is beyond what my senses can sense? And that is fascinating.
It is. I agree. And then I imagine you find moments of truth with that as well. Has that been your experience?
Definitely. Like, I think I've been really fortunate to be able to go on this path since I was a late teenager, especially like going deeper, and to be able to find stillness, to be able to find that point that I can go back to, in a sense, every single day, and to be able to understand all of that. Yes, like all of this is actually, it comes together. And yes, at different moments, something shows up in a different way, yet all of that comes back. And for me as well, there's this sense of deep trust that everything in the universe is working with me. And, as things move, I open myself completely to trusting. I surrender to what's there, because if I would have gotten in my own way, a lot of time I wouldn't be here now, because I wanted, when I was, as an example, when I was living in the US, I wanted to stay there. And then the universe was like, well, your visa extension, even though everything was okay, like it was denied. So from one day to the next, you need to go. And like, and randomly find myself here in New Zealand after a year. And it's like, well, if I would have thought that I needed to stay there, I would have, in a sense, fought it and tried to stay there, instead of surrendering and being like, well, there's something bigger than me that is, that wants me to move on somewhere else. So instead of getting attached to the idea of getting there, or frustrated, or in any way like negative about I need to leave, or it wasn't approved or anything, it's like, well, what's next? What's now? And to be able to be with that, and to understand, a lot of times, I remember some years ago, I do a lot of healing with sound and vibration, and crystal balls and gong. And one day I was doing this group session, and I'm playing the crystal balls, and I feel what people are feeling, so I know what do I need to play.
Yeah.
And I started feeling something on my throat, but it felt different than what I usually feel, that is a blockage from someone. It felt like something, like not from someone else, but something from me. And it felt like I need to open my mouth. And suddenly, like out of the blue, I started to chant, and it came out from nowhere, in a sense. I'm like, where did that come from? And people started asking me, like, through the years now, like, if I can teach them how to do that. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's just coming.
Yeah.
And I can feel it, and other people can feel it, and it's wonderful. Yet it's because I am open to surrender. It's the same, like I was doing the other day a family constellation session, and like one of the women was like, how are you like able to, like do this? I'm like, I'm just open. Like I'm literally just open to what the field is showing us, because there's so much in the field of energy that if I allow myself to be open to the experience and to the subtleties of the energy in the field, then I can follow that. Mm-hmm. If I am on my way, if I am actually thinking, if I am trying to do something, then it doesn't work. But if I, in a sense, empty myself and allow the energy to come through, it's so easy. And it's the same with that sound. And I started, like with that, I'm like, oh, wow, this is, like, this is wonderful. And the more that I trust and the more that I surrender, the more that things come. And that's, for me, one of the things that a lot of times I try to challenge myself, and I try to challenge everyone that I work with a lot of times, is about our beliefs. We need to work hard, and we need, as you were saying, like you have this idea of, and I'm going to stay married, and like all of these things. It's like, well, like those ideas, like how can we challenge all of that? How can we challenge? I was challenging one of my clients the other day about, what if life is easy? What if everything in life comes easy? Instead of you have to work hard, everything is hard. And it's like, well, where does that belief come from? That things are hard and life is hard and we need to work. Like, it's like the system is set up in that way mostly, but also we believe that, which means that then the system continues
Right.
If we wouldn't believe that, if we would challenge it, then we could actually. So I was like, what if life is easy? What if work and money flows easily to you? What if all of the resources and the abundance flows easily to you? What if, like, just to challenge our own beliefs and our own systems that are holding us in that place instead of allowing us. And the more that we allow that surrender, the easier it is to allow what needs to come.
Exactly. Beautiful. And beautiful. Building that relationship with all that is. Yeah. Beautiful.
I think that, with that, go.
Oh, I'm just inspired. I'm inspired. I play piano. You can even see it behind me. And I've felt that there's music that wants to come through me that way. And pretty early on in life, it got blocked. I had an emotional experience that, I realized, okay, I felt like, oh, I have to play perfect. And it has to sound a certain way. And now when I sit down, I do open up. I just say, whatever divinity, whatever wants to come through me, that's for the benevolence of all, let it flow. And just tuning in and letting go. And I have the most beautiful experiences. I don't remember what I played. It doesn't matter to me. And sometimes it sounds really crunchy. Sometimes it's just like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I committed that I'm going to sit down and do this. So I'm going to see where this goes and do what I can to get rid of that judgment. But there are times where it's just this beauty coming back to me, the resonance of the instrument and the tones that I'm playing, even though it's out of tune, and then somehow they sound amazing, like suddenly it tuned itself.
And how beautiful that you're able to, even though there's that inner judgment, that you're able to do it, because that's a lot of times, as you were saying, like, we got blocked because we've been trained to judge a lot of ourselves and to think that everybody else is judging us. Instead of understanding nobody's judging you, and if they are, who cares? It's like, that's their own judgment. It's not about me. And the more that we can, in a sense, relax that has us, in a sense, prisoners of our own experience, because I see so many people with their throat chakra especially, like, closed, because they haven't been given the opportunity to speak their truth. So therefore that's so blocked. And a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's walk down the street and let's just go, and let's just say, like, kind of like in the middle of a busy street, because who cares, and it's like just allowing that to stay, to open up and be like, perhaps I'm not going to get paid to be a musician or a singer, but that's not why I'm doing that. I'm doing that to, like, there's some energy that is coming through, there's an enjoyment of doing that, there's like, that's something that I want to do. And it's just because we are living within a system where we need to make money and all of these things. Like, what about just doing things for the pleasure of doing things, and just to be able to, as you're saying, like, I'm just going to play the piano, and if something comes up that was beautiful, beautiful. If something comes up that it wasn't, it wasn't. Like, I can, as I was saying, like, the first time that I was that came through and I started chanting, and it was so beautiful. And some days it's not the same thing that comes, and it's like, okay, like, all good. Because at the end of the day, I understand energy that is moving, and not so much the attachment to how it looked like or how it sounded or different things. So as long as I experience something beautiful in the moment, and that can support others, if I'm working with others, that can support others, then that's all that matters. And it's not about being, like, if we are walking down the street and doing something that might, like, be detrimental to another person, like, as long as, like, it's being conscious of other people and their experiences, then I can do, in a sense, what I want.
Right.
So there's for me that balance of understanding, like, just because I want to give myself the permission to do the things that I want to do, that doesn't mean that others don't matter.
Exactly. It's like honoring life. You're honoring the life of another. It sounds like you're also very much trusting life, trusting that which gives life. That, yeah, words just sometimes don't do with some of the things that are beyond the physical. And I don't have any issue with if somebody uses the word God or any, deities or Allah or whatever, they use. To me, it's all about that which gives us life, that which creates all that is, and
to be able to surrender to that is so
yes,
important when we are so language oriented.
right.
It's so important to be able to give ourselves the opportunity and the space to experience something beyond the logical understanding, and to be able to do that sometimes needs that level of trust, needs someone to be like, oh, like, do I want to do this thing that seems weird or seems foreign? It's like, well, what if I give it a chance? And then it might be like, well, no, that's actually not for me. Or that might be like, oh, wow, like, that is amazing. And how can I get more of that? And it's
Yeah.
like, and to be able to allow that, as you're saying, like, that trust and that confidence in the universe or in life, it's so important, because that enables our growth, that enables our experience of life, that enables us not to get stuck where we are. And to stay in that comfort zone that doesn't allow us to go anywhere. Yes, it might be comfortable, but that doesn't allow us to go anywhere. So as long as we are allowing, and we're inviting, and we are non-judgmental, then, like, the world is our oyster, in a sense.
True. This is really inspiring to hear, because there are not a whole lot of people who really have developed that much trust in that surrender. And I'm always looking at, where am I limiting myself from that? I start to taste it more and more, and then open to it more and more, and then where am I blocked? And so, yeah, I appreciate you. And even on this podcast, this, the expression that can come through here, it's all open.
And you just mentioned blockages. That's so important, because we are all carrying those blockages. And one of my things that I was introduced with one of my teachers was falling in love with finding these blockages, so then I can actually integrate them and release the hold that they had on me. So it's about processing them, integrating them.
Beautiful.
And then I can move forward lighter, like. And that's, one of my teachers used to say, our full potential as human beings is in those blockages. So if I want to reach that, I need to work with my blockages.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You're reminding me of an experience I had a while back, where I knew a friend. I had a friend, amazing in terms of that kind of surrender and allowing the flow. And so she was doing healing work. And I would occasionally get a session with her. And I just intuitively felt like things just aren't quite flowing the way they ought to be. I sense something's blocking me. So that was my intention in my session with her. And she's really adept at looking in my energy field and seeing a few things that she specified. And one of them was my throat. And I had been in a relationship there was a lot of imbalance. It wasn't working out so well. I was, I was feeling a little brokenhearted. And I had noticed that every time I was with this person, I would want to express things that I would literally stop. Like, I'd start to open my mouth and literally nothing would come out. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't speaking my truth. And I didn't think about that when I went to the session with her, but I sat and, I just said, something's up. Can you help me here? And she's like, yeah, you've got something blocking your throat. She saw it in a certain way. She kind of described it to me. She said, that doesn't matter. It's just showing me this is where one of those areas where we're going to work. And she did her healing work the way she does, which is, outside the physical senses. And I didn't really feel anything. I trusted, I went along with it, held my intention. And that night I had interesting dream time. I tossed and turned all night. I felt like I was struggling with something all night. And the next morning I woke up and I went off to dance. I love ecstatic dance. And so I was going to the ecstatic dance, and the woman who held the space saw me when I walked in. She's like, "Are you okay?" And yeah, I feel great. I had an energy session, and I kind of had weird sleep, but now I feel amazing, and she's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, why? Are you concerned?" And she says, "Well, your neck." And I'm like, "Well, I did energy healing on my neck." Get this. She was seeing, and I went and looked in the mirror then, she was seeing a vesica piscis in like a bruised color of yellow around my whole throat. And then in the middle of that vesica piscis, and I described that in my podcast for people who don't know what it is, but it's like the birth portal, and it holds that container of all form. But in the very center of that was a black and blue heart, like this perfect heart shape. I had no sensation on my neck, and no ill effects, but my understanding later was that sometimes that's sometimes what happens when energy is working itself out, that I had no sensation before this session or through it or after, and yet it left this mark, and it was very interesting to see. And then the next time I saw this person that I was having difficulty with in relationship, I was able to just confidently, I was shocked at first that when I did open my mouth to speak, it all came out lovingly, calmly, and beautifully. And I sat there like really surprised with myself, almost afraid of what their response would be, but realized they took it really well. I delivered it in a way that wasn't triggering, apparently, to them. But yeah, it's amazing how those blocks can clear and then free us.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that a lot of times with a lot of the people that I work with, not everyone is open and has experienced so much so that they are completely open. Like a lot of times I get people that come because they have tried their things and this is like, well, nothing has worked, so I'll give it a try. Or someone else was like, go and see Brian and like go for a healing. And a lot of times, like it's I tell sometimes like to some of my clients, it's like, do you want to understand or do you want to shift?
Oh, beautiful.
Because sometimes they go hand in hand and sometimes they don't. Sometimes we don't know what is happening, and like and I see this like like I've got so many clients that we do a session and then the next day or the next week they're like, wow, this happened. I'm like, yes. Like, of course that happened. Yes. Like you move that energy, you allow that energy to actually move, you allow that blockage to relax. You like when we do that, it doesn't seem sometimes that we are doing anything, yet we are, because we are also energetic beings as well as physical beings. So the correlation of we can work on the different levels and that has an impact on everything else. It's like for me, all of the physical illnesses are just energetic imbalances. When we actually address everything from an energetic perspective, then everything else comes back into alignment and comes back to its healthy, natural state. So of course things happen like that, and it takes a lot of trust to go and to do that for those that perhaps we haven't been open to that. And I'm so fortunate and I'm so grateful for my parents that as a teenager they started to introduce me to some of these things, and yes, then I have learned and studied a lot of different things that they haven't. And like a lot of times I talk with my parents, and I'm really grateful that I'm able to talk about them. Like we're doing meditations, and we're doing now for the last few years, like together, some meditations on 5D and like going into the quantum field, and doing a lot of different practices.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how many people can actually talk to their parents about that? It's like I
Yeah.
got on the phone with my mom. I'm like, Mom, like, like I went and like, and I called for this energy, and this felt like this, and like, and I connected with my telomeres, and it's starting to engage
Oh,
that, and like, and being able to like, when I did my training on the teachings of Drunvalo Melchizedek, it's like I guided my parents to activate the Merkaba and to be able to understand that, and like all of that. Like, I'm so fortunate. So I've been introduced to these things at such a young age that for me all of this, like, it's completely natural. Not so much for my siblings; they didn't like go in the same path as me, but I see the same with so many people around the world, and it's like, well, like, yes, we are not in a paradigm that is the natural or the normal thing. It's natural, yet it's not normalized. So a lot of people are apprehensive. They don't understand what they cannot see, what they cannot experience, because they are not feeling, they are just thinking about things. And one of the things that a lot of times I tell people is like, well, can you use your phone? Like, I have my phone here. So, like, can you use your phone? How is it connected? What's the cord? Like, we used to have cords in the phones.
exactly.
Like,
Right.
what is this connected to? Well, it's connected to like to the Wi-Fi, or it's connected to the 4G or 5G or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, what is that? Can you see it? No, I can't. Well, it's there. Like, I can see it.
Yeah.
So, like, just because you believe that the phone is operating, then you're actually believing in energy that is invisible to the eye.
Exactly.
Therefore, there's a level of openness, just finding what's the right key for someone to be able to lessen the hold that
Yeah.
they are like keeping themselves in that space, so they can open, and then they can get to that place of trust, and to have that confidence that, yes, this is happening. There's this element of energy. There's these other things that are a little bit more mysterious in the universe,
Yeah.
yet it's all there.
Yes. It's all there. Yes. And then you don't have to deny it anymore. And the mystery to me just opens the doors to just more fascination and awe with life. So yeah.
Mm.
You were talking about the sound healing that you're doing, and I'm so fascinated by that. And of course, cymatics is one of those things that got me to understand, make this connection that like sacred geometry is like frozen music, and that sacred geometry is a dimension, whether you see it in 2 dimension or 3 dimension, 4 dimension, if it's moving, then it's simply representing something in another higher dimension, and that it expands in many ways. And that I'm curious if you've experienced this in your meditations, where you might see a form and then have it show you its form in higher dimensions.
Mm.
That's one of the things that I've come to understand and experience, is that we're multidimensional beings, that the essence of what we are, mind being perhaps that consciousness, what comes through the cell into this cell phone of a brain that we have, that is kind of lost my train of thought for a moment. It's all coming in.
But yeah, like I see so much
Mm-hmm.
like on everyday life, and then when I'm working with the different vibrations, it's kind of like, especially if I close my eyes, I could see like some of the patterns.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that a lot of times with people that come to see me, I tell them, you might see different things, you might see different colors, but also not getting attached if that's not your experience, because we are all experiencing things in a different way. There is so much with that, and that's why I started to love working with vibration in the sense of sound as well, because that's a way that we can understand much more easily the waves and the patterns of energy and that sacred geometry in a way that we can actually experience it with our senses. Like a lot of times I tell like people, because sometimes I do, you know, like the sound healing online, and I tell the person, even if through the internet, at some point the internet is not great, so the sound is not coming through perfectly, it's not about the sound, it's about the vibration that is coming through it. It's the same as, you know, like it's not about the oxygen that we're breathing, it's about the life force inside of that oxygen that you are breathing. That's what's important, is that energy. So the more that we understand that connection, it's wonderful. And for me as well, you know, like as I started to do more chanting, like, and I can feel it, like I feel like, and a lot of times in my own practice, you know, like I close my eyes and I start like, and that is like, and I can see all of that in there, and it's like, and that for me is so fascinating, because it's with my inner eye that I see that experience, and I can feel it in my throat, in my chest, in my belly, and hear it with my ears.
Yes. And see it in your mind's eye, which kind of brings me to the fact that you are you study neurology or neuroscience. So yeah. So do you have anything to add that helps people kind of understand this process?
Well, for me, with neuroscience, one of the most interesting things is some language, to be able to meet some people that are a little bit more logical and are not so open to energy or spirituality with things like that, and understanding, okay, like our brain it's like it has that capacity to be plastic, like what's called neuroplasticity. When we understand that, then we understand there's a potential for change all of the time, because our brain is plastic. And understanding as well, like, okay, like if my brain is plastic, how do I create the change? So understanding, you know, the potential of, if there's this this pathway, so there is, you know, like something happening, and then it goes into this neuron. If I'm keeping on using this neuron, which is the way that I'm seeing the world and I believe things, then every time that something happens, I'm going to actually allow just that pathway to be activated. The fat that is actually growing in that neuron is what is calling for that electromagnetic pulse to go through it. The more that I can allow other of the pathways to start to be incorporated, then the easier it is. Now, one of the key things for me is the understanding that I can go the long, hard way to do that shift, which is to change habit. It takes repetition, and it takes a lot of time to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of discipline, and it's doable.
Sure.
Or I can bypass all of that. I can work energetically, and I can do what a lot of times is called a quantum leap, and I can literally just create like a bridge there, and to just allow a very different pathway to be activated. And that activation like might be what allows me to see the fractals, to see the sacred geometry, to be able to see beyond what I've been experiencing. And the interesting thing for me with that is just like our brain is just like showing us how we can operate, and it's showing us something, and it's not about, you know, like getting caught up with it's just the brain, or it's just the body, or it's just the energy. No, it's everything. It's all together holistically, all working together. And it's just as I'm saying, it's just, you know, like if someone is only going to listen to me because I'm talking about neuroscience, and that is like, oh, like Brian did a postgrad in neuroscience, so I'm going to listen to him. It's like, cool, I'm going to use that language for the same exact thing that for someone else I might be talking about. Okay, so let's call for the energy of Jesus or Buddha, and let's, you know, like, let's embody that, and let's move that energy, and let's work with this blockage. I'm talking about the same exact thing,
Right.
just in a different language.
Yeah.
So for me, the fascinating thing about neuroscience is that neuroscience, what it's doing, neuroscience is now actually proving what the ancient wisdom traditions have been saying for thousands of years. And it's not even catch up to, like, I don't even know what percentage, perhaps 20% it can prove now. But the more that time passes and technology keeps on accelerating exponentially as it is, the more that's going to prove that. As an example, like, nowadays, the cutting edge way of healing cancer is through sound healing.
Yes.
It targets the cancer cells completely.
Yes.
So it's a non-invasive, just vibrational way of healing. So literally what it's doing is just bringing your body and those cells back to balance. That's all that it's doing. So it's not that in a sense it's killing cancer cells. What it's doing is just it's bringing them back to balance. We can do that as well with our own intention within our meditation practice. If we understand how to do that, we can connect with our own selves, and we can allow them to go back to what they are meant to be at their essence, and not what I have programmed them to be through the years of living a different way. So if I understand that, the same as working with crystals, you know, like we can program the crystals. This is an amazing vehicle or machine, however we want to call it. And the more that we are moving towards an acceleration of understanding, the easier it is to make those changes within ourselves. So, you know, I like in one of the meditations I mentioned the telomeres. If I work as I've been doing for years of elongating my telomeres, I can grow younger.
Right.
So the idea that when we grow and years pass by, that we actually grow old, that's ingrained within me. So my telomeres are going to behave in that way. They are going to shorten and shorten and shorten. So my body is going to decay. Therefore, my entire being is going to start to experience that. If I can rewire that, and that's from a neuroscience perspective, just rewire that, then what I can do is actually change that and grow younger, and I can have more energy, and I can have more stamina, and I can have all of these things. And it's like, well, who told you that you grow older? As a collective, we believe that because that's what we've been seeing. We haven't been seeing all of those people that have been living for hundreds and hundreds of years historically. So therefore, we believe that those are outliers. No, those are people that connected to that fountain of youth. That fountain of youth is within ourselves. And how can we connect with that? Well, we connect with that either through our own awareness or through vibration, or we just need to find what's the way that we connect to that.
Right. And you found the way for you to connect to it. And do you teach others then how to find their own connection?
Yeah, like when I can work one-on-one with people, depending on what they are trying to change in their lives, like I do work with that a little bit. And for the ones that want to, as I share that with them, it's like, yes. But it's something for me with that it's so about just meeting like people where they are and just trying to figure out, okay, this is the way for them. And it's not always such an easy thing when it's a group. So for me, a lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with people, it's so much easier to be able to guide them through that process and to be able to open to that, because as there is an understanding on the interaction as working together, then it's easier to be like, okay, for this person, I need to guide them in this way, or we need to make these movements physically to be able to engage that energy pattern to be activated. And it's just, you know, like, it is possible. It's just finding, again, like, how does everyone like open up to that? And once we can find that, then it's like, okay, now the changes accelerate. Because once we find the key, then the door is open. It's like, okay, energy,
Yeah.
come.
Yeah. Cool. You're reminding me of the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza when you talk about group teaching and how he's got so many people hooked up to monitors and using sound, his voice, to kind of like create a different modulation that will be that signal for them to, when they say pop, I guess.
Yeah.
I haven't been to his events, but I knew him, worked with him personally quite a few years ago, back when I lived up in Washington. And yeah, really appreciate his work too. And I love that you can offer an individualized work with people on this level.
It's, yeah, I mean, I love that because, yeah, I even though I like working with a lot of groups,
Yeah,
I know that like it's not the same as working
right.
one-on-one. Like it's
Yeah.
never the same. And there needs to be, like a level of connection and a level of trust on each other and an understanding. And that only comes with
Mhm.
actually working like at least for a certain amount of time with someone to build that understanding and to be able to actually find, okay, like this. Because I can say, like with some people I might use certain words, and those words, like if I'm saying that in a group, as you mentioned earlier, like if I say God, well, like if there's 500 people in the audience, then 500 people are going to have a very different experience of the one word that I just said based on their own understanding of what that means. So, like I can't be all of the time trying to unpack, well, by God, I actually mean this oneness, energy, like, or whatever it is that I mean by that. And it's like, there's when I'm working with a group and I'm, like I'm giving a talk or like I'm running a workshop, I'm limited by time and I need to use a language that we have mostly agreed upon, even though we don't really understand really what we mean by each word that we're saying. We have all kind of agreed that more or less we understand what we're saying, but that gets in the way. So when I work with someone and it's like, okay, this person actually understands this, believes that, has this conditioning, has this programming, then it's much easier for me to find the way of connecting, so that if I'm guiding them through a meditation or through a practice, then I know which words I need to use with that person.
I'm glad that you offer that. I'm fascinated. I feel like I'd like to work with you. And I'm still, it's like, oh yeah, I still have so many things I would love to tap into and explore and expand in myself. Yeah, definitely.
It's I think that's one of the fascinating things about where we are, and just to understand a lot of times, again, what we resonate with. It's so important for me as we're going through this path to understand, what do I resonate with, who do I resonate, and it's one of the reasons why, like, even though a lot of times, like marketing people tell me I need to do this or that, it's like, well, I'll just allow people to come to me.
Yeah.
And like I'm fortunate again that nowadays people are coming to me, so it's easier to be able to say like, okay, this is how I choose to be, and this is as well what I used to do when I was studied. Like it was back in Argentina where I was growing up. Like the people that I ended up working with, my teachers and the healers that I went to see, nobody knew them. They were just, people that like they were recommended. Like
Yeah.
it was just word of mouth, and it's like you knew that that person was dead. Like like they were it, because
Yes.
they, like, someone that you trusted like recommended that person, and then you go and see them. It's like, yes, and that for me is so key, that
Yeah.
to be able to just as well, and to be grateful with the universe that it's just now, like people just come and like want to have a session with me, or want to work with me for a few months, and it's like just to be able to get to that place. Like, I'm so honored that I can provide something that people like seem to find it helpful, because like that's my aim. And it's like, and I know I'm not for everyone, not everyone is for me. Like, I have had multiple times people that wanted to work with me, and I'm like, no, like, yeah, like, I'm not the right person for you, or you're not the right person for me. I mostly say I'm not the right person for you. It's just not to make them feel unwanted. And I recommend them to someone else, because like at the end of the day, yes, that might have been more work, or like in terms of money, but if there's no alignment in the energy, in that resonance, then I much rather spend my time like in the garden and or reading a book or something, instead of having a client just for the sake of having a client. And I find that like, again, that trust that people will come, trust that people will recommend me, trust that the universe is conspiring in my way, so that people actually want to engage with me. And of course there's a level of I'm doing things, like I put myself out there, I run workshops, I have conversations like this, and so people can understand, or can be like, oh, like I exist.
Yes.
Yet I am not someone that pushes or tries to sell. It's like, if someone resonates what I do and they are interested, wonderful, come, let's have a chat, let's see if this is actually something that might be of benefit for both. Because one of the key things that my family constellation teacher told me many years ago was, everyone that is coming to work with you, they are for you as well. It's not just for them. There's a reason why those people at that moment came to work with you. So everything is about my own growth. And in that way, it's kind of like, in a sense, selfish. It's like, yes,
but
come and work with me, because that's for
works
me.
both ways too.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
there's that flow, that
There's
energy flow of giving and receiving, and bringing that into balance is so important in every aspect of our life. Giving and receiving needs to be balanced. In relationships, it needs to be balanced. If I'm giving too much and the other person is taking, then there's not going to be a balance there, which means that that relationship is not going to be able to continue unless there's a redirection of that energy. So everything in our lives is about that balance of giving and receiving. And that is just, okay, like, I need to figure out where that is in my life, and what are those blind spots or those spaces that I cannot notice.
Yeah. Great. So if people do resonate with you, do they reach you at the consciousaction.co.nz?
Yes,
Okay.
there, or through Berneman.com. Like, I have
Okay.
both that I use, or the same on social media, like either Conscious Action NZ or Brian Berneman. Just find me, message me, like, I'm always like happy to connect, even if it might not lead to actual work. It's like, well, like, it's still wonderful to connect with people. And like, I might not have the time to have conversations with everyone, or to have long conversations with everyone, because I also honor my time. But yeah, if someone does resonate with anything of the things that I do, or want to learn more, yes, connect with me through there.
Beautiful.
I do think that this universe that we're living in is like, sacred geometry is at the at the core of all of it. This is the foundation of all of it. So the more that we understand that, the easier it is as well our lives. This is why Tesla used to say, like, if you understand 3, 6, and 9, you understand everything. Like, even though like I'm not, very into mathematics, sacred geometry, I am into. And when the biggest thing for me in the way that I experience it is I haven't done so much the drawing or like the painting of it. It has been more feeling it and visualizing it. That's why for me, when I did my training on the teachings of Drunvalo Melchizedek and the flower of life and activating the Merkaba, that for me has been so important to be able to understand my experience, because I am much more inclined to feeling than to like what I can use with my hand. So my encouragement is for those that perhaps haven't experienced this or don't know what the Merkaba is, like to explore it, whether it is through this podcast or whether that is through the teachings of Drunvalo Melchizedek. Like I loved all of his books and all of his teachings, and I resonate so much with them.
Yes.
And again, it gives another understanding of how to get there. And for me, those teachings as well were a great gateway to my heart, because that's where the activation starts to happen. So a return to the heart as well has been so important through like sacred geometry. And who would have thought, like geometry, the heart, it's like, well, that's how you start to connect the dots in this universe and in our life. So my encouragement for everyone is just like do some of that experiences, and perhaps yes, you might be someone that needs to draw them or you need to visualize them. Just find what's the right way for you to work with sacred geometry, and because it can blow your mind.
I agree. It's definitely been mind-blowing to me. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for everything you've shared today.
Wow.
And I'm really inspired by what you do. I will definitely encourage people to check out your websites, because then they can find out, if they've been intrigued by what we've been talking about, they may want to learn more.
Yeah.
So
And thank you for the space and for putting this information as well out there, and sacred geometry, and like every little thing that we're doing with this is reaching the right people at the right time. So everything that you're doing like I think that is important, and thank you for giving me as well the space to have this beautiful conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. Yeah. It seems ironic to me that the things that I'm putting out there have so much to do with the geometry, and I think of words as just descriptions of this completeness that we're talking about, the wholeness of everything in the universe that's so hard to describe, because that itself seems like the pure language. And here I am, we're talking about it again, because that's one of those ways that we connect so easily. So it's kind of funny and ironic. Anyway, it's been a blessing to talk to you again. And
likewise.
Yeah, thank you, and wish you well, and well-being to all people in New Zealand and all our connections.
And everywhere in the world.
Everywhere in the world. All the ways we connect. If you have enjoyed this podcast with Brian Berneman and would like a little more inspiration, then you can subscribe on my Patreon account, Sacred Geometry Portal on Patreon, and get a little bonus track. And I'll see you in the portal.
This podcast has been a production of Sacred Geometry Portal. Dive deeper into the portal by subscribing at sacredgeometryportal.com. You can support the portal expansion through Sacred Geometry Portal's Patreon account. Infinite fractal blessings, and thank you for listening.